Okay.
Okay. Hi, Frank.
Hello. Nice to
Uh,
meet you.
I suggest that you just tell first about your background. Like, how did
Okay.
you start studying philosophy? What are your interests? And yeah, and then
All
we'll
right.
just go on and see how it's going to work.
Sounds cool. My name is Frank, as you can see from the thing. I started studying philosophy when I would say I was 16 years old. I got my hands on a couple of books from my stepdad's library, mainly very, very basic stuff like Plato, Aristotle, and a couple from actually from my school. I got my hands on some Eastern philosophy, mainly the Tao Te Ching, and some other like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which was a little heavier. And I liked it. I dug it. I thought it was totes cool. And I just kept reading and consuming as much of that stuff as I could. And I've had no official like formal like academic training in it. I've had a friend named Kwan who was kind enough to bring me up through formal logic. So I've studied in that area. He was an instructor and he said I would get the credits if I was in his class. So that helps.
Is the kind of analytic philosophy, like
yes,
formal logic?
Yes. Yeah. So currently, yeah, that would be kind of like my background. I just read a lot of books and then, I use what I've learned from the books, from analytic philosophy, logic, and a bunch of other things to kind of make sense of the books, either apply it to my life or apply it to concepts I see in day-to-day life.
You haven't taken any courses in academia? Oh, that's
nothing.
Yeah, I also didn't, and I kind of autodidact, so I was studying on my own and reading.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good downtime. Just sit and read a book. I mean, not all of them are great to sit and read on downtime. Some are infuriating.
So you mentioned the Tibetan Book of Death, and I apparently read the probably first 10 pages of this book, maybe 20 pages this summer. So I took it from the library and tried to, like, I didn't read the whole thing because after 20 pages I got distracted and I couldn't really keep on. This idea, I really liked it. Like they compared Eastern and Western world, and the Western world is more about like outer experience and the material stuff, and in Tibet, they focus on inner self, inner experience, and try to dive in. Like, I guess there was name like psychonauts, if you remember, like psychonauts who just
are you talking about like the video game or like?
No, it's the book.
Okay.
And this like there was a comparison, like astronauts, people who go in the outer space.
Okay.
And in Tibetan Book of Death, there was psychonauts, so they go inside their psyche and focus on like what's going on inside.
Yeah.
But at first it was kind of reasonable, but then I like when there's some astrology and stuff like that started to appear, I couldn't follow. But this idea, when you study yourself instead of the outer world, like, what do you think? What does it have to do with philosophy? Is it like, can philosophy really be divided in these two parts, like studying yourself or studying the world?
It can be divided into those. There have been philosophers who have done it. I myself, I am what's known as a property dualist, which is I think there's a difference between mainly mind and brain, or mind and material, or something like that. The model that's used to differentiate, understanding yourself versus the outside world, I find is helpful in illuminating certain aspects in each. It helps me to understand by differentiating them, which if I otherwise brought them together, it would make the logic more opaque and not as clear. It wouldn't allow me to grasp it as much. This isn't true for all things. This is one aspect I'm talking about. But as to like Tibetan Book of the Dead, the introspection, disconnecting yourself more so, and really diving into your psychonauts, as you were saying. Uh, I look at that, and to me, that's more like an existential thing where we often in Western culture, there is some of it in Eastern culture, but especially in Western culture now, we have a tendency to seek a fulfillment outside or from, you know, from material grasps or relationships or something like that. And especially in Tibetan in Buddhism, there's a focus on instead, you know, taking the time to look inside, see what it is about yourself or your psyche that is not getting fulfilled, and not doing it so much by, you know, going on Amazon and binge shopping, but kind of just, you know, what is it that I actually want? What is the thing I need to, you know, to get to stop, you know, to fulfill these urges?
Yeah, is there such a thing in the first place? Like you know, maybe.
I mean, okay, I could stop, you know, and I just criticize people for Amazon binge shopping, but I shop on Amazon, so let me get rid of the hypocrisy immediately.
Okay.
Like here's one aspect. Recently, because I like to lift, and one of the things is I have a cheap blender right now, and it doesn't blend up my shakes, my protein shakes very good. And I'm sitting here and I'm going like, man, I wish I had a better blender to blend up these protein shakes. All right. And the thing is, I could just look inside myself and be like, maybe it isn't actually that I need smoother, easier to drink protein shake. Maybe I need to be more stoic and just, you know, not allow it to affect me. But then another part of me is like, you know, I really don't like drinking oatmeal, you know. So I got the shake. So, and I have tried it and tested it, and I do like it. So, and that would be one case where I'd say the external was, so far as I tested it, a good thing. Of course, there'd be other instances, once again from Amazon, where I buy a bunch of impulse things because I'm bored, and then I look and I go, why the hell did I get this back scratcher? I can reach it with my regular hand. This makes no sense. This was $15.
So it's kind of maximizing your comfort, but still there's always kind of balance, and you understand. At least you understand. You are aware what's going on right inside.
You're learning. You're taking the time to go, oh, I did something, reflecting upon how it went. Kind of like the scientific process. Okay, you have a hypothesis, you test it, you reflect on the outcome, the observable outcome, how it relates to your previous hypothesis. And then you either redo the hypothesis or you continue the theory. If it's favorable, you continue the theory and try to reproduce it. If it's not, redo your fucking hypothesis. So
how about an extreme version when you like reflect on your reflection and then you reflect on your reflection of the reflection? And
if we're gonna go down the rabbit hole of self.
Yeah, but it may be, you see, it may be really exciting. So you start, for example, let's say there are 16 hours every day, which you are, you know, awake. And you may choose to act for 1 hour, and 15 hours you may spend on reflections and see how that way. It's kind of extreme case, right? Or you may just do like 8 hours of reflections, or 8 hours of, you know, acting, or you may do just acting without reflection, right?
And to be clear, like we're doing it right now, we're setting up in an area where we're going like you're either acting or you're reflecting, and I would be like, no, some people do this pretty simultaneously, like interchanging, especially in ethics, human relations, when we interact with one another in a dialogue like we're having right now. There's constant data input for me doing an act, seeing how you react, and then me introspecting and going like, oh, should I act this way or do this thing over and over again? It's happening like that and that over and over again. But yeah, I mean,
to which degree do you think it's automatic, and to which degree you are really consciously making these decisions? For example, what to say next, or how to react to something what I say, or how to answer the question. How much time do you think before you before you answer the question? Like, is it an immediate response, or you just, while trying to develop some idea, you just reflect simultaneously on what you're saying, and then at the same time you try to correct it and, you know, to give it a different direction?
Yeah.
So,
I mean, for stuff like more small talk stuff where we're not like engaged. I know you had a conversation with Michael, who's a great guy. He's a mathematician. And the thing that I put on is like our small conversation, we can usually do this really fast, almost on a bit more behavioralist. I'm just seeing a thing and I know I have a chunk of like moves, like in chess. I don't remember all the movements. I just know a set of strategies that work for a certain move to react right away when I see it. Okay.
yeah, chess
But
a good analogy.
yeah,
I like this
but
analogy of chess.
the thing is, when our questions get more advanced, and this is where philosophy or mathematics come in, when they get more rigorous, or you were just talking about reflecting upon your reflecting or something like that, where we're talking about self-referential areas, which would, I could bring that all the way to Gödel's incompleteness theorem if I wanted to. That's where the things we actually have to stop and we have to think. We actually have to consider it rigorously to, we can't just react. I mean, we could. We would probably sound like a damn fool if we did.
Yeah, but this. Have you read Daniel Kahneman, Thinking Fast and Slow?
No, I have not.
There's this idea that it's two types of thinking, and one he calls them two types, but actually it's the same type. He doesn't differentiate them, but he explains in knowledge that like intuition, when you use your intuition, when you just respond without thinking, and this is the first type, and usually it's most of the time it's wrong. And thinking like slow thinking, when you like observe what you say and then probably try to come up with some better ideas, and then finally, like after making 2, 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many assertions, you just pick one which usually, like the best one usually lies deeper than, like on the surface you may catch only like superficial ideas, superficial thoughts, but the more you think, the more you can find. But anyway, tell me some, there's the question, what are the most valuable philosophical concepts which you like encounter in your journey?
Like I would say if I divided, I could approach this a lot easier if I divide it up into like the 3 major schools of philosophy, which is axiology, some people know as ethics, epistemology, study of knowledge, and metaphysics. Like in ethics, I would say probably the best principle I know is deontic logic's ought implies can, which is a simple expression, which is to say, whenever I say something ought to be, I'm implying that it can be that way. Real simple expression. To give some example, I look at you, I'm like, you ought to have a car. Well, if you can't have a car, if you don't have the ability, then my ought is superfluous. It doesn't mean anything, because I'm just sitting here saying what you morally ought to be able to do, regardless of your actual ability to do it. So you can kind of you apply that with logic using the rule of inference known as modus tollens. You can say for all instances where can is not, as a consequent, ought will also not be. You can have that simple inference. Another one in the same school would be like Kant's second formulation of the categorical imperative, which states always to see others as ends in themselves, never as mere means. So the key word there is mere means. That's the biggest key word, which is to say, I can see you, like I can pay you for a job or see you as someone or something that could, help me in a task, but it's never that you can just be a thing or a tool or something to my means. It always has to be that that person has a potential rationale and morality about them, or something like that you can't just reduce them to a cog for your means.
Yeah, and let me interrupt you. It's not natural. So it's categorical imperative. It's something that you create. Like it's not. If we were animals, we basically we kind of selfish all the time. So like this idea of selfishness versus selflessness, right? So a categorical imperative basically it's a basis for morality, for operating in the world,
yes,
for living like with other people and not destroying each other. And this is pure, like it's kind of idealism, right? So this is an idea. If everybody if everybody decide to follow this categorical imperative, we are supposed to live in a kind of perfect society.
Now, I have to say, I only endorse the second rule. The first rule, I think, is absolute bunkum, where he says, act by the axiom that you see as universal. Because I would be like, applying a for all statement from to all humans or anything off observations, which that's the universal part, that's always going to fail. That's a sweeping statement fallacy. I'll look at that and I'm like, no, you have to have a specific area. And this is kind of where the utilitarians came in and kind of hacked away at Kant. But that second formulation, just seeing another as ends in themselves, a potential rational or anything, oh yeah, I'll stand behind that 100%.
Is it in the critique of practical reason?
Yes, critique of pure reason.
Pure reason.
It's in that, and I think it's in Grounding of Metaphysics of Morals.
By the way, how you got through the entire book?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
How many times? How many times?
Only once. I only need to do just once. I reviewed a few areas that were of interest to me. To most people, I would recommend who really want to get into not just deontology, it's Kant's deontology, which is different from standard deontology. I usually just recommend Grounding of Metaphysics of Morals. It's shorter, it's focused on that specific area, so you don't have to go through all this other shit. It's 700 pages long.
Yeah, but still it makes you like after you get through it, it gives you a certain, weight.
Oh yeah, it's a masterwork.
I was doing lots of work on the book, and I was comparing notes between like A and B. Like there was the first edition, and in the second edition he changed lots of things because he was accused by being a solipsist, and he had to like change stuff. And I did it a long time ago, like in 2013, and I've read the Critique of Pure Reason like 2 times. The first it was just I was sick and I was like I had to work, and it was kind of the way to get rid from reality, from sickness, and just focus on something and forget about real life. And I got through it, and I didn't remember anything. Like it was kind of like watching a TV show. So without trying to analyze anything, just kind of first whatever. First, like I tried just to get familiar. But then the second time, after a few months, I got back and decided to work on the book. So, and what I did was taking one paragraph and dedicating an hour to analyze that paragraph. And I was able to work for 1 month, like a little bit more, maybe 1 month and 10 days, doing this job. And then finally I realized I know everything about all these things in themselves. I know what it means. I know how to explain all of this to myself. And I stopped. I didn't go further. I mean, in this work, in this analysis. But later, people always say like, what the hell? Like, why do you need to know all this stuff? How do they help you to live in real life? Are they really have any purpose? If you know, like, what's the difference between things in themselves and appearances? And well, it really helps you to think. It helps you to understand how complicated your thinking may be. And usually when you try to analyze your day-to-day experience, you may like overlook lots of things. And as soon as you know that if you just try to pay more attention to something, you may actually go deeper and deeper. And such books like Critique of Pure Reason, like for me, it's very fascinating. I mean, I try to kind of commit myself to read it the 3rd time in English, since I read it in Russian in translation, and now it's too hard. I still can't reach it.
I find on books like that, and this helped me with Hegel, Kant, Hume, like those big 3. Hume, I didn't need that much help on. He's pretty plain, but Kant and Hegel, I definitely needed the help on. And what I found is I would be reading for a long time and I would zone out, kind of like we were saying. I'd be like, I would die like after about 10 pages, my eyes would just go blank. I couldn't do it anymore. I was still going, but I wasn't retaining anything. But I also noticed that as I was going along, I would come across like a paragraph, a sentence, or something like that that would snap me out of it for like a second. And those areas where it snapped me out, what I would do is I didn't have tabs with me. If I did, I would use them. I just really quick dog ear that page. I would just dog ear it really quick, and then I would keep going. And that was a notice to me to come back here, double check, because I think there's something here, and we'll work it out more rigorously. And like you said, just going with a paragraph and deconstructing it.
I remember when Kant wrote the book, I guess he published it in 1787. It got popular. Like lots of people discussed all these antinomies or apories. I don't know how it translates in English. When there's like, is the world finite or is it infinite? And Kant gives two answers, and he says yes, it's finite, and then he goes on and proves that it's finite, and then the next page he gives an answer, no, it's infinite, and then he moves on and proves that it's infinite. And like parts, or is it consist of parts, or is it like the entire whole? Like there were four antinomies. Like, do you remember some of this? Or
which ones were you talking about?
Antinomies or apories. I don't know how they are called in English.
Oh, the apory.
Yeah, four. Like
analytic, synthetic, and I don't know. I remember that.
There's like
him trying to
like
prove synthetic a priori.
Yeah, it's like, listen, there's the thesis, like the world is infinite.
Yes.
And he proves it by some, I couldn't grasp all logic, but it seems that he goes and there's no contradiction and he proves it fully. But then next page he says the world is finite. And then he goes on and proves that it's fine. It's somewhere in the middle of the book. I don't remember what's the section, but it was very famous at that time. And people like Hegel probably commented on this too. And Schopenhauer, later when I read Schopenhauer, he has a work, like he criticizes Kant's critique of purism. And he says Kant actually was mistaken about all physicists, and all antitheses are true.
Oh, the antithesis. Are you talking about the thesis, antithesis, and synthesis? Or?
No, it's Hegelian. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's more of Hegelian, kind of like antithesis, thesis, and like synthesis.
Oh, fun fact: Hegel didn't come up with that. That was Fichte. Fichte was the philosopher, and many people don't forget about this man. He was actually a great philosopher. He was the philosopher in between Kant and Hegel. He was actually the guy right there.
Yeah, I've read Fichte, like about science. I guess it was science. It's called in Russian. It was called "Nauka учения," like science studying or science learning, or And
I've read The Vocation of Man, The Vocation of the Scholar, and one other book I can't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, but this guy Fichte, by the way, he was famous in Germany for being a solipsist. Like he was accused like this guy.
He was. I mean, he didn't. It wasn't until Hegel, the famous master-slave dialect, or as he calls in the book, lordship and bondage, where we have, because in Germany, idealism was in vogue, like absolute idealism. And it wasn't until Hegel where you get the concept that we know in today's philosophy as the many minds problem. And you have the problem, he called it his beginning of consciousness, where you have to recognize another thinking thing, and you have to take in consideration. And he used the famous master and slave dialect to kind of illustrate that, where you have two beings who both want to be, in his case, on top or anything, and the other one, and kind of what comes out when their moralities don't always match up. They keep being at odds of the other one. So,
Yes. What do you think about Hegelian absolute spirit? Like
or Geist?
I don't know the German term, but
well, it's when I read Hegel, I had to learn a fair amount of German. I didn't have to. But if I wanted to understand, what he was saying, I had Geist was a big one. But in German, it can mean spirit, it can mean God, it can mean mind, depending on, how it's presented. And the thing for Hegel that it's supposed to be is the idea of the progressing, or as I understood it, the progressing collective psychology of like a people through time is what it is. Very akin to in our modern age, what you would see in like evolutionary psychology or sociology or anthropology. The idea was very objective idealist, almost Platonic, in the fact that he thinks we're striving towards like, absolute ideal, like we will have the perfect object or something like that. There's a form in our minds that it's not out there like Plato, it's in our minds, and we're striving, eventually we're going to come to it just from interacting, something like that.
Like pure consciousness or something
like that. I should point out, this is actually one of his ideas. I look at it and I go like, I get what you're saying, but there's a logical fallacy in what you're doing right there when you go, eventually we'll get to it. And I'm like, that eventually, okay. The fault is saying it's possible, ergo it must be the case we're going to get to it. And it goes, no, that's a fallacy. You're saying something's possibly true and coming to a necessary truth, out of it. And it's like, so that isn't to hurt on anyone. I do think psychologically or on a cognitive level, we as a human race have been progressing in many areas. It's just that, kind of like what I was talking about with Kant's categorical imperative in the universal, I'm like, you need to be specific. I need to have a context and area. Like if you say we're smarter in the field of mathematics than we were in 300 BC, I would say, oh, absolutely. I totally agree with that. But if you just say, well, we're smarter than we ever were in the field of mathematics, we'll look at you and go, no, that's opaque. That's ambiguous. I can't, I can look at people, Pythagoras could have done, a geometric proof. I know tons of people right now who can't do geometric proof. So that doesn't necessarily hold for all possible worlds. I can't say that rigorously. So I don't know. I'm getting off on a tangent here.
Yeah, actually, this idea, like you probably heard like pre-modern, modern, and postmodern. Like yes. postmodern, and it's not about actually time in a chronological sense. It's more about like some people live in modern time. It's because they think in as people of modern era thought. And the pre-modern is people still living like, although they're living right now, but their thoughts, they're more similar to those guys who lived like 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, who believed in some things which like was very hard to even like talk about, right? And postmodern, it's like kind of nobody knows what it is actually.
In regards to like modernism and postmodernism, in what we're talking about with Hegel, and because usually the traditional take and the kind of, especially from Kant, the age of enlightenment, everyone was like, yes, we can figure everything out with reason. We don't need to have everything like this. That would be what I would say is like a foundational basis for like modernism. The idea that, we can know these things, we can figure them out with reason, it is reducible down to these areas. The area that postmodernism would come up, and it would kind of say what I'm saying, except it would even give even light in, I was saying we need to have like, circumstance or something that I can compare to make it sound. Postmodernism would say that doesn't even matter, we can't figure out anything with reason. And to be clear, there are instances where both of these I feel rings true. Like poetry would be a good instance. I could look and I could break down a poem and I could give it structure and explain why one piece of poetry is better than the other. I could say because of the structure, because of the use of the use of rhythmic
rhymes,
yes, or something like that. But ultimately, it comes down to, what does the person who's reading the poetry like more? Which one they may like?
What
they may like
feel,
shells.
right?
Feel better. It's more of an aesthetic thing. So it kind of shows the limits of reason. That isn't to say reason can't do anything, because I absolutely think it can, and you should use logic where you have the chance, but it can't do everything. Like, there are clear limitations where I would go, yeah, especially like art, belief, religion, whatever. There are areas where I go, yeah, that's not going to work. It's ultimately you either like it or you don't. It's a moral problem. It's no longer, it's a subjective value. That would be my definition of moral.
Yeah, do you think it's like a subjective value? Do you think it's possible to have objective values where something must be? Must be.
I feel objective value. Well, we were just talking about odd implies can, right? And like that. I feel like objective value, I take straight from Kant's book of definitions, and I go, morality is subjective value, ethics is objective value. It's the actions. And the thing is, I say in ethics, we imply value. We make an observation of a person that's an end in themselves. And from them doing what they're doing, let's say they donate money to a community pot or I don't know, they give money at church, okay? And from that, we observe and we go, that person values the church or whatever they're doing. Or so I can imply that it is the case, but as I am not the person, I cannot fully know their intent. That person may be just thinking, oh, I just have to do this because I don't want to look cheap or stingy or something like that. I can't be certain of that. And this isn't just for value. This is a case of, if I was observing any action of a person, there's something about a person or another rational being that I don't have to consider with like a rock or a tree or something. It's that thing has intent that I cannot be entirely certain of. It is a means and ends in itself. It can lie, it can deceive, it can do things for reasons that I am not, already clear of, that I would be clear of with a rock. I wouldn't be sitting there looking at a rock saying, why are you deceiving me so, and shaking it. I would just say, my model's wrong in interpreting the rock. The person I go, they may have an ulterior motive or something else behind the scenes. So that would be, I would say we can have objective value, but it's contingent. It's more so I am looking at it and I'm kind of going, I'm implying it from the actions. An area where I'd say objective value may be more certain would be, my own objective value, where I'm aware of my belief and I'm aware of my action. I can be in this area. And this is where you get more so Sartre, where it'd be like, I'm being authentic. I'm being authentic to my values in my actions. I'm bringing them forward. In that case, I would say, oh, yes, I can be more certain. But then the classic problem comes about where someone goes, well, are you sure those are your values? Are you certain that those are your values that you're representing? Not like your family or your pastors or your school or anything like that.
Or your culture.
Yeah. Okay. And that's where we go back to where we were talking on thinking, where it'd be like, oh, I have to sit here and can I actually, rigorously defend my values on my own without, coming back. And then we get all the way to postmodernism and what we were talking about Kant and aesthetics, because eventually, if you try to break down your values, you're going to come not to like an observation, or an observed end, you're going to come to assumption. I think this is good just because I think it's good. That you've assumed it doesn't need justification, and you start building on that area. So like, I think this art piece is good, and I can point out reasons why I think it's good, but eventually, no, it's just because I think it's fun, would come about or something like that.
So let me make it clear. So at first, like, morality is subjective, ethics is objective. Morality is when you have certain values and you follow these values. Ethics, it's about behavior between people. Like when you do something, when your attention is good, when you really understand, like, I'm doing this act not because I want to get something for myself, but because I simply want to give something, right? Or to help somebody who actually is in need.
If you're being authentic and actually representing your values.
But then when I ask, then when I ask myself, okay, why am I doing that? Is it because I am a good person? Is it because I was convinced by my parents, my school teachers? Am I just mindlessly following certain algorithms, or I'm trying to like find something unique, something in myself which I know like is good because it feels good and because it like something that I get from other people. If I enjoy it, I try to like do the same towards other people. And if I don't enjoy it, I try to stop this behavior and simply, do something else, or not repeat it, or not spread it around.
Yeah, like that's that's pretty much it. I would say as to the behavior, it could be that it makes you feel good. It could be like the thing that I would ultimately say is, yes, it's going to come down. I said assumptions, could also be just a feeling that makes you feel good. Or it could be that just somewhere down the line, you assumed something was good or something like that for your first line. But the thing that I really want to put the focus on is it's not about finding the feeling or the assumption. It's about just trying the rigor on the value or something like that. The minute you start to reflect, or at least that's what I believe, or Hegelian would believe is the same thing. The minute you try to reflect and actually understand your own values, they're more so yours. Your actions are more so yours rather than just a consequence or something like that. And therefore, the actions that you make from a consequence of them will also be more so yours. So you can be more objective with your value. There's still some problems.
I have some problems. Yeah, I have some problems with like what we call yours, or the self. Since I'm kind of a determinist, so I don't believe that
I know Spinoza.
Yeah, no, it's not Spinoza. It's actually like Schopenhauer and then Nietzsche. And Spinoza, actually, I've read the ethics, and there's some great great ideas. But I was the first time, just let me tell like short story. So I read Schopenhauer, and it was 2012, and it was the first time when I started really thinking about this problem of free will, about determinism, and I catched myself that I never gave thought to this matter. And then I started looking more and more for people who were determinists. So Schopenhauer mentioned Voltaire, French philosopher, and Voltaire, he wasn't a determinist for 50 years of his life. But at the end of his life, he changed his mind, and he started explaining why he became a determinist after believing. And he wrote a metaphysical tractatus, or where he argued that the determinism is all nonsense, free will is like the only thing there is. But then he said, "Oh, I was wrong, and I came to this realization because," and he gives some reasons. And then I started looking for people who also was kind of deterministic, but they weren't just deterministic because they were born and believed in determinism from early age, but because they really were convinced that there was free will, but at some moment they found counter evidence and they changed their minds. And I also then I started looking for people who did exactly the opposite, who were determinists, who was raised that there's like fate and nothing, nothing is.
To be fair, I'm not what is it called? A libertarian. That means free will enthusiast in philosophy, not the political party. I'm what's known as a compatibilist. I believe in determinism and free will. So but
you still like you were like first you were kind of determinist.
Yes, I was very deterministic.
Then you like in compatibilism, I guess it's like a property dualism. It's also
it's kind of the way I came to it was Hume's argument for liberty and necessity in his work on inquiry into human understanding, which is I started realizing that it had more to do with how I defined free will and determinism rather than actually representing things in the real world. I had forced them through my definitions because my understanding of the two concepts were still nascent or young. I had forced them into a false dichotomy that one meant not the other meant not the other. And I came to the realization that if I took time and I worked, and Hegel helped with this, if I worked these concepts out, I could define the two in the same system of thought without negating the other. Which means that they absolutely can be in the same system without contradiction. So
let's just try to like discuss
Yeah.
it in kind of simple language. So, for example,
Okay.
I think about my past,
Yes.
and let's say I say a word like whatever one, like
Yep.
I now I think, could I say a different word if I had the same opportunity, like if I go back in time, and at the same moment I had to say the word one, either one or anything else. And my question is, how could I say a different word if everything, like all atoms in the universe, all neurons in my brain, like everything would stay the same? And at the same moment when I pronounce one, like there must be something changed in past in order to make me say something else.
But the area that I reply on that, I say, this isn't a question of determinism. This is a question of identity, of consistent memory. Because the thing is, you're saying, because I remember that I said one, when I go back and say it, I'm going like, oh yeah, I said something different, but it's only because contingent upon I said one that one time, and I wanted to see if I could do something else. And that's where you're deriving the cause. You have order in this sense.
Let's say, okay, let me think about the future. So, for example, there's some certain future, and I say at some moment it will become past, right? If it will not become past, it's impossible future, right? If it will never become past, there's no such future, right? It's just a kind of and even when I make a mental model of the future, it's like it's going on right now. But there's famous Aristotelian argument, like for example, in next 100 years, or not 100, let's say in next year, you will either be a philosopher or you will not be a philosopher, let's say. And if you say like it's already predetermined right now, so you can well, I guess it's so hard for me to explain.
I would look at what Aristotle said there and say he came up with what I would call a falsifiable hypothesis. He came up with, next 100 years, based off my observations, this person here could be a philosopher or could not be a philosopher. So he has a way that, one of these can be wrong. Okay. Yeah. And the thing is, I would look at that and be like, that's a good hypothesis. I'm like, but does it account for the observed conclusion, the determined thing in my mind? Or is it just accounting to its relationship to your hypothesis that it is or isn't one thing? Person, instead of being is or isn't a philosopher, could be a baker. See what I mean? It could be an alternative, not just.
Yeah, but it's not a philosopher,
That's the thing. Because we put it in a black and white spectrum, everything that isn't philosopher immediately goes over to one side, or vice versa. And the thing is, I look at them like, but we're not actually describing the observed phenomena. We're just, focusing on this dichotomy that you're enforcing because that's the only way you can understand it. And I would say this is poor logic. I'm looking at you, poor empiricism. And I'd be saying that to Aristotle. So
I guess it's still like it's kind of, it frames our thinking. So we use certain examples, and it helps us to understand what's really going on. Because for me, even though I say I'm a determinist, but I actually, like, it was probably 3 years, 2012, 2015, then I discovered Sextus Empiricus, and he was a postmodernist of ancient times. It's skepticism, Pyrrhonism, this school, and they wrote almost everything which later has been written by postmodernists. So there was three divisions, like what you mentioned, three main school of thoughts. Can you repeat them, by the way?
Are you talking about in the Hellen area? That would be Epicureanism, Stoicism, and
no. You like you mentioned before you said about three major schools of thought.
Axiology, and metaphysics.
Axiology is values, epistemology is knowledge, and metaphysics
is truth, belief. Pretty much what we can't touch with epistemology.
Yeah, but at that time they divided it like academics, skeptics, and dogmatics. And dogmatics were like Plato, Aristotle, everybody who found the truth. And Epicurean, Stoics, whatever. Academics were those like Kant, who say there was no Kant, but there were guys who said that truth is impossible to find. Like no, we don't need to look for it because we will never be able to find it. And skeptics, they say we don't know what's the truth, but we are still looking for it. And the purpose was to judgment, withhold judgment, not withhold. What was the word? Suspend judgment. Like there's, we may frame it in a Hegelian way. So there's thesis, and for every thesis, there's always antithesis. And for a skeptic, it's not the way to find what is right, what is wrong. It's just what there's thesis, there's antithesis for everything. So your goal is to understand, to find an opposite antithesis to every thesis.
Now, to kind of bring the thesis and antithesis into more modern era, really the way I see it, because I want to make a connection between continental and analytic philosophy, is it's an application of reductio ad absurdum, if you know what that is in logical proofs. It's where I assume the inverse or the negation of my conclusion. So if I came to the conclusion, Aristotle is a philosopher, the inverse of that would be Aristotle is not a philosopher. Okay. Not Aristotle is a philosopher, whatever negates it properly. And I would show that assuming the inverse would come to a contradiction in my reasoning or something like that. And when I look at that Hegelian model of thesis, antithesis, and I have those two areas, the most sound reason I can see applying it is to show that if I assume one of these conclusions, I come to a contradiction, so I start going more so towards the other one. Now, Hegel would want you to see if it's possible that you can have both of these areas and synthesis, bring them into a model that would work, where you would redefine them. And to be clear, if they're put out there in any way where one is the negation of another, you cannot mathematically, soundly, logically have these two things in the same area. That's the one area where, this will always result in a contradiction. You can't have P and not P in a sound conclusion. It's
but in this first model, you can have it, right? So you may
the emphasis that I want to put here, we're talking about determinism as free will, and to anybody who would listen, is on the importance of defining your concepts and how you define them. That people are going to immediately go to a dictionary and try to find, what the common area, and the area I look at, I was like, no, I'm not having this conversation with a dictionary. I don't want to know what a dictionary thinks about this thing. What are your ideas to it?
I have a definition of determinism, which I came up quite recently. I was thinking about fate for the entire week, a few weeks ago, and but it's not even a definition. It's just whatever has happened, whatever will happen has already happened. This is determinism, and
that's very Newtonian.
Well, maybe I don't know.
I'm not a scientist, but I would point out quantum mechanics is a thing.
Yeah, but quantum mechanics this actually doesn't disprove anything. So if you look,
quantum mechanics does disprove the idea that came with Newtonian. It may not come with your definition, but it came with Newtonian determinism, where if I knew the past or all the factors of one circumstance, I could accurately predict what was going to happen.
But quantum mechanics says no, there's probability and it's always random, right? Or
the biggest thing is Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. But
but actually, the point is, I remember this Schrödinger cat experiment, right? Like thought experiment. So you have a cat in the box, and it's either alive or it's dead, and it is in superposition, because you don't know unless you open the box. And when you open the box, it's
wave function collapses.
But the point is, there's no in the universe somebody who is outside. So you are all also in a superposition. Every observer is in the same superposition.
There'd be a couple conflicts that would all argue that God's outside. I'm not one of them. I'm just saying those arguments exist.
But the point is, they try to kind of simplify it and say, okay, if we there's the system, like a closed system. There's no closed systems in the universe. And when we look at it from this point, like this ideas of is a particle a wave, or it's a particle and it changes its behavior whether or not there's an observer, or when you think about this dichotomy, it also it only works when you assume that there is something that is not in this it's something outside of the this system, but there's nothing outside. That's the problem. And I remember lectures by Sean Carroll, I guess. I watched he talked about this quantum mechanics, and he's a physicist focused on quantum mechanics, studies quantum mechanics, and he explained this. And I also was thinking, oh, quantum mechanics, great. It's determinism. Now I found the solution for free will. Now I'm happy. And then I found
you don't need to go that far for it. Trust me.
Yeah. Then I found these guys, and they say, no. Determinism is actually it's not disproved by quantum mechanics.
No.
Yeah, but the skepticism, when I found, as I mentioned, in 2015, when I found Sextus Empiricus, and I read 2 volumes of his outlines of Peronism, I was, wow, this is, I don't know. I can't actually tell, because I have as you say, you have to have a definition, but to have a definition, you have to have some proof. To have a proof, you have to have a criteria.
A definition. Okay, from my definition of definition. Or how I would state it is, I would say you don't have to have, well, you kind of do, but definitions are assumed. We just come up with them. Okay. It'd be something, when I say assume, I mean axiomatic. It's past justification outside of other assumptions or axioms. Okay. That'd be back to the P thing, where I couldn't have a definition and then have the negation of that definition in the same premise. I couldn't have that. That'd be a state of axiomization.
A is not A.
I can't have P and not P in the same premise and expect to come to any sound reasoning, but without contradiction. The thing about definitions, and kind of going back to the painting and all the thing that we were talking about, morality and everything, is eventually, I know it would be Russell on the analytic side, called them descriptions. And he put them much more in kind of a materialistic area, where he would say, materialism being that everything reflects a material world. Now, I just said that I was a property dualist a while. I'm also an idealist, which means I think everything reflects our mind, not the material world. Well, the thing is, there are plenty of descriptions, Wittgenstein pointed this out, are definitions that don't necessarily reflect anything in the exterior world, except other definitions, other words that come
just
from
language.
that area. They're just language that interact with one another. And this is where I kind of come to the conclusion. I'm like, oh, they're assumed. There's no justification or evidence or a posteriori connection to them. Kripke would hit me in the gut for saying that, but these are my thoughts. But the idea then that we get to, when someone says, like when you said, that everything in the future has already been affixed kind of by what's happening now or something.
Yeah, but an important point is we don't know. Nobody in the whole universe knows what's going to happen. The point is it has happened, but nobody knows. Nobody sees it. And there's no way to know.
It's all happened. I forget the theory. It's called B theory, I think, or something like that, where it just says everything has happened. We're just kind of going through emotions.
Exactly. That's you are watching a movie,
and I would look at that and I'd be like, neat. But I'm not looking, like you said, I'm not looking at this from like a God perspective and seeing us just going along this thing. I'm looking at this from an individual perspective. And the thing is, in order for me to act, to go from one area to another, I have to assume some sort of will. Otherwise, or to have any identity of myself or belief, or to bring back metaphysics, I kind of have to have will. Because the minute I just go, oh, I am just a product of the external things that are going on around me that have already been predicted and happening, then I look and I go, if I look at it this way, A, there can't be any subjective value. I know that's going to happen immediately. There's your Nietzsche. B, I know for a fact that anything I say or anything is just a consequence of descriptions or anything on the exterior or anything. But then I look and I go, yeah, that's neat, but I like that painting over there. Or, I do this expression right here that I know I can't have a description, I'm going to do a foul expression. Where's the, where's the description to that or the thing that's referenced? It's just an expression.
Yeah.
Kaplan did a great thing on that, where he just said, oh, where's the reference to explicits? That damn Kaplan. Now we look at that and that means something different than saying that Kaplan, but where's the reference to damn? Where's damn out in the outside world, or any explicits or expressives? So it may be the case that everything has happened, everything going, that's possible. Though, as I cannot observe it or in any way fix it, evidence, I can't say it's necessary. I can't say that it has that inductive truth that I can go by. So somebody who's on the other side of this, who says, oh, nothing has been predicted and it's all just, happening, and falling randomly, or might be going, has just as much value to saying this or evidence as I do at this point, because it's all theoretical. And the only thing that comes in it is like, well, in both cases, the only argument the person has in both cases is that their argument is sound. It's consistent, what they believe. And so I would actually say, by arguing for determinism with this counter argument along it, both of these people are expressing their unique will in this sense by them going at the area.
Yeah, but
they may both be determined, but I can differentiate between them.
Let me just put it a little bit more clear. So you say you have will, right? And my version of determinism is actually the will has you. So you transcend your identity to this will, which are, again, it's just kind of idea. Like will itself has you, and it's close to Fichte's solipsism, since you say what I am is just a manifestation of this will, and this will, it's actually everything. So from this version, I'm just go through all possible manifestations, but I am aware now only of this individual, because my experience gives me unique perception of the world. But then at some moment I die, then this will manifest in another part of itself, and it's going to be you, for example. And I will think, oh, I'm Frank now.
It could reanimate. It could be the end. I don't know.
And for me, this idea of will, it's basically, it's not just I die, then I'm going to become somebody, a good person if I live good, and a bad person if I live bad. This will, it goes through all possible living experiences. So what does it mean? It means I, as a will, not as this person, but as the will experience everything. What has happened with the will? You see, I'm going to be all forms of animals, insects, humans, all other.
You're talking about the will as like a separate entity shared by.
It's not separate. It's like a kind of not. You say you basically say I have a will, but will has me. You see, you kind of you transcend your identity. And
that is very Spinozian.
And think about yourself not as an individual, but as this like big thing, and then it kind of it moves you. I don't know. It's very.
Sure, you could think that.
It's very speculative, but
you could think that way. And if that works for you, bully. I guess you were talking at the beginning of this about the practicality of, or I don't know if we got to that, but I would say, like, if it works for you, this would be kind of the pragmatism. Great. The only thing that I would say is, to counteract the pragmatism, is I would also say, but don't. Okay, if it works.
But it's not dogmatic.
But if you see something better,
exactly. That's what I'm searching for, something better. Like
but don't stop. Don't stop.
Yeah,
keep going.
It seems that this is the most sound idea, as you say. So I've heard lots of things, and some of them appeal to me, some of them not. But mostly this idea that I may transcend my identity. It's not kind of escaping from the world, or trying to become immortal by placing your identity in some abstract concept and believing that you are this thing. It's more kind of regulating your emotional balance, just trying to think deeply about your own nature. Like, okay, what am I? Am I this body? Am I this experience? Am I language? Am I, everything around?
And that's where I ultimately go. If you try to say, okay, you're doing identity as an expression of a shared group of qualities or categories or predicates. You're saying, I am, let's say, male, person with brown hair, brown eyes, whatever you want to say. But eventually I look and I go like, no, you're listing predicates or categories. I'm looking at them like, you are a name, you are a particular, you're Vladimir, Vladimir doesn't need these categories or anything to soundly be, and I want to express this is sound. This is how you actually do logic. To be expressed, it just needs a name. That's the only kicker. I'm Frank, someone could look at me. This is going back to Theseus, and they could be like, oh, Frank is red beard, bald, glasses, all these things. But I'm looking like, yeah, but all these things could refer to me or refer to another person like me. Ergo, they're categorical because they work off analogies that could possibly be to me or another person. Universals, if you're talking about Kant. And I would say the only thing that's particular to me, that refers to me particularly, is the name,
right? But
Frank.
Yeah, you see,
that Frank.
Yeah. But I think this is actually the mistake. So when we use the name and say Frank is like this person, you know that you always changing, right? So today you Frank version 1, like in the next moment you update it a little bit, and then you become like Frank Prime, and then you when you use the same name, like remember when you was a child, when you were a child, right? It was like two different persons. You have a name.
That's the thing. I'm saying you're looking at this categorically. You need to look at it from an abstract identity. Okay. Yes, the person that I was when I was 3 is a lot different than the person I am right now. If you're looking at me right now, when I was 3, I was a little, toddler, and now, I'm a grown adult. There's a bunch of different categories or anything. But the reason that you're able to even begin and go about that there's differentiating or start isolating those qualities or anything is go, that was Frank, this is Frank. And the qualities may indeed shift, but what you've connected is you're saying, there's a coherent Frank in that you're going here. And I'm looking at you and I go like, are you sure about that? How can you list that? I didn't just come into existence right here, right now at this age and everything. And then we're going to go back to an argument we had earlier. You're going to go, because there's a memory of Frank, or there's, a history of Frank or something like that, that I can cite back as evidence. But me being a skeptic, I'm going to be like, isn't it possible that that is just an illusion or a deception, or our memories are wrong all the time, history is wrong all the time, fact, or what we think is right in history, like Columbus discovering the US or something like that, can turn out to be wrong. It's fact, it's contingent. So I look and I go at that again and I go, you may have a causal chain of Frank, but as it is causal, it is always only sufficient. It is never necessary or determined, fixed in this area that this happened to here. The only thing you can say with certainty is that there is Frank, an assumed particular Frank in this instant. And it
helps us to interact with each other, to understand each other. But when you think about your identity, right? Like, how can you identify yourself with just the name? You see,
and I need to differentiate on definitions. Identity to me is contingent only, or defined as only dealing with a name. I deal kind of with the logical mathematical identity. So categories are on predicates and analogies, kind of like these are the qualities that this group of people or things or whatever share, that we have an ultimate set for all of them. So just to because that's important, so we don't get confused anymore.
Yeah, I see. Let's talk a little bit about thinking. Like, there may be different ways of thinking. Can you tell me, like, how do you think, and are there some different ways which you imply in your thinking?
Yeah. How do I think? Well, of course, I only use logic, and that's the only thing that exists. But yeah, different ways.
Wait a second. And maybe I just said it wrong. So there's like an idea, not just thinking about consciousness itself. So you are awake for 16 hours, And I assume that you can't like use logic and use language for all these 16 hours and be consistent and always think the same thing. So what I'm asking about by what I mean by thinking is basically this stream of consciousness which goes through your mind.
Okay.
And what kind of patterns do you observe there? How it works? And you know, do you have, for example, I have experience of thinking, like taking one thought and developing it for hours. And trying to write something and, like, you know, be consistent. But then next few hours I just go around and I don't think about anything at all. But it's still, there's some logic, there's some ideas, they come in, they get out, and I don't try to even focus on anything.
And what I'll kind of notice is I may have a concept that I just kind of like those dog-eared bookmarks for Kant we talked about, that I kind of see as interesting, but I'm not fully going into my head. And I may have designated that a while ago, but there will be random moments of inspiration or motivation where that concept will come back up in my head. And maybe it's because I learned something earlier or something. And all of a sudden I just start running with it. And like, you know, or another really good one is if I'm talking to a friend or something, they bring up something that maybe I forgot, or maybe, you know, I just put on a back burner and they bring it up in a different way. And all of a sudden I go, oh, and just start running with it, you know, and I can, like you said, go for hours, write things about it. And all of a sudden I'll be like, wow, I made a lot of progress on that one area. Like, and I'll try to do it usually for the sake of being consistent and understood, because usually when I think these things through, eventually I want to present them to other people and see what they think about my thinking. Is usually I'll try to use as much sound and simple logic to express it as possible. But, you know, there's limitations to that. And eventually, sometimes I'll go through other methods just for funsies. Like a good example was me and Michael, who was on this, we're having a discussion about Occam's razor, right? And I detest Occam's razor with a passion. And the way I decided to kind of refute his argument for Occam's razor, I sat, I thought about how I was going to do it, but I got hit with a little bit of whimsy is I wrote a 12-page didactic, which is an informational poem in a way that had like the mathematical phrasing and everything in it that played in it. And I just sent it to him, you know.
12 pages?
Yeah, it was 12 pages. I mean, it was.
Can you send it to me too? I'd like to read it.
Okay.
I'm really curious.
You know, I feel like Voltaire would be very proud of me at that moment. Or Lucretius would be very proud of me at that moment, where it's like, you know what, we could do this logically, but let's just put in poetry for the funs of it. But I try to keep it structured, but I also realize, you know, people that I talk to do not always have a logical background, or their interest may be in other things. They may be scientists, they may be poets, they may be they have a different lens that they're seeing the world from. And what I need to do, if I'm going to kind of bridge our lenses, is I don't need to just say clearly to me my thoughts when I translate them. I need to see it clearly to them, and I need to make, you know, a connection with them. So my thought process is really an area of amassing as much facts and raw data that I can, making it sound to myself, whether if I'm inspired to do it at an instant by an interaction or just randomly, it happens. And then once I have it sound in my own mind, what I try to do is I try to consider all possible audiences. It's more rhetorical from a speaker and audience perspective. And I try to translate it. It has different languages and dialects for each person or possible category of person. You know, I may describe the faults of determinism to you through Hume or something like that, or through Hegel. But if I was talking to a scientist right now, and they're like trying to, you know, really go Einstein on me, I'd be like, I'd look at them all of a sudden and be like, what about Stephen Hawking's no boundary principle that goes off an imaginary line that has a topology that can have a shuttlecock that it has never a beginning or an end, that it can explain the expanding or the area? And they'd be like, where did this come from? Like, because I prepared for this. It's the same thought. It's the same rigor. I'm just saying it differently through a different lens. Yeah, I mean, you don't necessarily need to translate your thoughts. You can't just think to yourself.
So it's kind of two languages, or not just two, but many different languages. You kind of one language you use for yourself. You come up with an idea, you develop it, and then you see if you interact with other people, you try to translate it in their language so that they can understand it.
Yes.
I've noticed often I have kind of I wouldn't say I do it on purpose, but it just occurs. So I'm just go on, and there's kind of inner dialogue, and I see that I'm just trying to argue with person. If they may be not like, I may be alone. There's no person, nobody. But I had a conversation, for example, last week, and something popped up, something that helps me to to find some new step in this conversation, and I just start thinking about it and kind of develop logically the path for like the next, probably the next time when I have the same conversation with this person. And I find myself like using language which kind of not my language. So I think in their terms first. And then I have to do exactly the opposite process. I have to translate it in my language. First, I argue with the person. I kind of come up with ideas which may be related to this person, but then I get back in my thought and I say, okay, let's now just try to think about it on my own, like as if I'm trying to explain it to myself.
Yeah.
So in this this second type, well, I enjoy it more. It's people definitely, very few people can really even read it when I write for myself. And sometimes I just do metaphors and analogies, which I know how I come up with them. But for me, you may take chess, for example, right?
Yes.
So, and you may incorporate certain interactions, just plan, okay, this is for example, you may take the game, you imagine that board is, for example, it's, you may blend it with some different experience, like with a conversation. Okay, in the conversation, I run the speaking club, and these people, there's, these people are pawns, and these people are, knights and bishops and, queens and kings and whatever. And you try to look at the situation from this analogy, and it clarifies everything. It makes you understand something that you couldn't understand before. But I have not just chess. I have, I guess, 5 games like StarCraft, Warcraft, Dota, and some other.
You have more complex realms of possibility.
Yeah, which determined the way how I think, and I find myself always making these analogies and. It's kind of my personal language, but I enjoy just working on it, and it helps me to understand much better what's going on around me when I have conversations and try to argue about something or try to find some, common ground with people.
Yeah. I mean, it really is, well, to me, it really is like a game. It is. Yeah. You're basically saying, and to clarify, because many people are going to put this very much so, it always has to be with an outside interlocutor, and something. I go no, I play chess with myself. Sometimes I play the role of both areas just to see what's possible and outdo myself.
I guess that's how you become
cuckoo. It's fine.
That's how you become a great grandmaster, and you have to play. You have to think about it. You can just.
But what you need to realize is what you're doing often when you're playing against yourself is you're actually doing a rigorous process known as a contradictory or proving the contrary or something like that. Mm-hmm. You're trying to disprove your moves or your possible movements to strengthen your initial thesis or anything like that. You're trying to find any possible way to outdo your strategies.
Yeah, you build the model of the future. You see in your mind whether it works or not. If it doesn't work, you just find another model.
The thing is, it could work or it could not work in your mind, but you could apply it. This is going from mathematics to science now. You could apply it in the real world, and what didn't work may work in the real world, and what worked in here may not work in or not work in the real world.
Yeah, but you try to find as many possible, counter arguments, or in the chess game, as many possible.
Because you you want to be prepared for, you want to feel like you put the
and
time
here's
and you do
this
your homework.
reflection, which we touched at the beginning. Like you, kind of you act, and then you have these reflections, and you come up with certain ways how. For example, I'm doing this philosophical dialogues. I've just started quite recently, and for me, I always try to think forward. Like, okay, who like let's suppose next guest will be this person, and how I will build a conversation, which kind of ideas I may discuss with this person, which kind of questions I would ask him, and then you build a conversation before it starts. You sit and think, oh, okay, this is like one way, this is another way, this is the third way, and then you have lots of options, and then when the conversation really starts, you may go and go through these options, or it may be totally different,
completely off on its tangent.
I was writing the same for group conversations, and I tried to use 5 or 6 characters just arguing about one particular topic, and like arguing by using them as if like trying to think as if, what they could come up with, when I ask this or that question. And I wrote, I don't know, maybe 10-15 pages of conversation. Then I publish it before the conversation starts. They read it, and there's nothing like that.
Well,
they just go.
What you're actually expressing, both from an abstract and an actual point, in like a mathematical sense, is you're mathematically, just from an abstract, would say I start with 5 characters and I have them discussing things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have an idea of where that conversation will end, right? Based on
no, I don't have any idea. No idea. That's the point.
Wait. I think I have an idea that where it'll end or where it'll go, just from these abstract, and I'm trying to create points. And it winds up just going on a tangent in the abstract. What you're actually illustrating there is, in mathematics, called the halting problem. Those characters are axioms, and you're trying to predict where it will end just based off those axioms. In fact, here's my fun fact: you can't do that. We actually know that's a problem in mathematics of decidability. But when you then try to apply it to the real world, and it goes off on tangents and everything, what you're realizing is the limitations of a hypothesis or possible truths in relationship to observed consequences or actual truths. So it's very interesting.
Yeah, but it's kind of, first I don't know where it starts, but for me it's kind of performance. So I conduct the club, feedback. I try to make sense of what was going on. Then I revise it, and then I do like the next step. So performance, feedback, revision, performance.
Well, let's think all the way back to this conversation when we started, and what you're doing is kind of like when we were talking about, where you had those long planned, thought out things about how the conversation is going to go. You're doing the slow thinking, and then you have to actually interact with people. And you kind of have to do it on the fly, where you have to come up with translations. And that's where like metaphors and analogies, as you said, come super helpful, because what you do when you do metaphors and analogies, you say, well, do you know this other thing or this other thing? And they may not, you'll find some, but what you're looking for is you're looking for things that share qualities or predicates similar to the thing that you're considering. And once they have that thing that shares the qualities, you isolate that quality and you say, it's analogous to what I'm talking about in this area. And the person's able to move across and connect the dots at that point. I don't know. I think that's neat.
So it's, I'm thinking that about this conversation, this particular one, like, could it go like let's see if we get back to this free will versus determinism. Could it get any other way? Like as we started, like we proceeded through various questions, and and the point when you think about it before the conversation starts, you kind of try to guess how it would go. This Aristotelian thing. Either you are a philosopher or you are not a philosopher. You try to think about the future. Okay, probably it's gonna go like this. And if the real conversation is not going like this, it's like you try to adapt your model to the reality. You try to see where it actually goes, and you not try. Okay, this must go like this because I decided that it should go like this. It's more it may go this, or it may go this, or it may go this. And the more model you have, the better the better you can handle it later.
Well, that's the thing. is a lot of people feel like if they have more models to approximate what could possibly happen, they feel like, oh, the odds are better that I'll be able to grasp the thing, right? Is how they usually feel. But if I look at them and I go, what if I told you there is infinite amount of possibilities that could happen for many of these things? And I would look at it like, if you have any countable number of hypotheses, there's still infinite amount of possibilities that could happen regardless of how many countable number of things that you have.
Right, but it makes you feel confident, you see? So
yes, it makes you feel certain.
And then this confidence helps you to build a good conversation.
It can. Sometimes it can completely sideline you because one of those infinite things comes along and it goes, I wasted all that time. Oh, shit.
Yeah, but you can say that if you're a determinist. You see, you say, oh, okay, it happened because there were reasons, and let's now figure out what were the reasons. And you sit and think about, you try to.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. I could say you could choose to observe, observe what actually happened and try to grasp it. Or you can do what we see a lot of people do in this stage. They could go like, they just ignore what happened and they throw themselves back into the theoretical side. And it goes, this happens a lot. And I don't want to get too politically charged. But yeah, people who just choose ignorance and going with, the theories over the actual happenings.
Yeah, I guess
so
this is kind
it's
of
definitely not, it's not guaranteed that a person's going to go with this.
Realism versus idealism.
Yeah.
So there's reality, which is
it'd be a difference between, I'm going to say in terms of modal logics, which would be an inability to separate possible truths from actual truths. Okay, possible being theory, actual being fact. Okay, you cannot.
What has already happened, right?
Yeah, what actually happened from what you're going, but back to the you talked about probability and confidence with the amount of things that you had in there. That's another conversation me and Michael have a bunch because he loves statistics, and he brought up an umbrella problem to me, and I think he brought it up on this chat too. And he was like, if someone told you that there's a 90% chance that it's going to rain outside, would you grab an umbrella? And I feel like a lot of people, including myself, usually would say, yeah, I'm going to grab an umbrella. But the problem I just presented you with, which was in a really surreptitious or secret way of sneaking in what's known as an infinite line inductive proof. And basically what I said is if there's infinite instances where it could happen regardless of observed instances, no probability could be said that could have a falsifiable hypothesis. So let me give you an example. If someone says there's a 90% chance it'll rain tomorrow, okay? Now, that hypothesis already has a problem because it can't be falsified. If it rains tomorrow, they'll say the 90% chance was right. If it doesn't rain, they'll say the 10% chance is right.
Yeah.
In both cases, I can say I was right.
Yeah.
Now, if I said something a little bit more contained and better, and I said, there's a 90% chance it'll rain for the next 100 days, all right? And someone goes, that makes more sense because we can go through 100 days. We can say
10 days
rain for 90 of them. And we would go, yeah, it follows from that. That's a good hypothesis. Now, here's the kicker. If I said there's a 90% chance it'll rain tomorrow, and I didn't designate how many days, all right? And I said, or there's a 90% chance it'll rain for all days tomorrow and going on, right? It could not rain for 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 days after that. Let's just say we're immortal and we can do that. I could still be right as long as there's a countable infinite after that 1,000,000 days. It could totally happen where if it didn't rain for 1,000 days, or let's say 10,000 days, the next 90,000 days it could rain.
Yeah.
And I would still be right from that area. So the confidence that we're expressing in this area isn't actually objective, it's subjective.
Yeah.
It's kind of, we feel that we trust this thing.
That we understand something, right?
Yeah, that we grasp it.
Yeah.
But it can't be objective because it's not falsifiable in these instances. I can make it in an instance where I can never be wrong with it. You know, that's kind of the gold standard for what we call as being potentially objective. Giving an instance based off of ethics and morality, which we discussed earlier. If I have the value of I love coffee, right? I can go to drink coffee, go, and I can be wrong and say, oh, I was wrong. I can drink coffee. So I falsified that. However, if I observe somebody who's drinking coffee, all right, and they say, I love coffee, and they drink this and they go, now, are they doing that because they don't like coffee or because they want me to trick me into thinking they don't like coffee and they actually do like coffee? And are they being consistent in their actions? Because people aren't like variables or mathematics. It's a funny thing. I don't know. I think it's interesting. I don't have any more to say about that. I just went off on a tangent. Sorry. I do that from time to time.
Do you think that the world is rational, like the whole universe is rational, and finally
I think the world as we can understand it is rational. Okay. That's kind of a cop out because, you know, the thing is, when I say something is rational, rationality is about, you know,
there was
how we
in Hegel, there was this phrase like everything
the rational is actual.
Yeah. And vice versa. What's actual is rational.
I agree with that, but it's more important that people understand why I agree with that, because I look and I go, well, rationality is how we understand or able to place things and order things in our mind and actually grasp them. That's what I understand as rationality. And when
something that you can describe without contradiction, right?
Yeah. You can grasp it. And the thing is, I'm just looking at, I'm just placing it out there that we see the world through a lens, and this lens is how we grasp the world. All right. And this lens is our rationality. Ergo, everything that we grasp has to come through this lens. So the world as we grasp it, understand it, is rational by this logic. So I'm not denying that there's an actual world out there. I do think there's an actual world. And the one area that I would say we kind of get around this lens, not entirely, is what I was just talking about, falsifiable, or the fact that our understanding can be wrong. It can be blatantly wrong. Like when I was sitting here and I thought, you know, I could think that this coffee mug, you know, will fall faster than this drive here. But then I could say one will fall faster. Then I drop both of them. I can be wrong. They're both going to fall at the same rate, you know. And the thing that I get there is I go, oh, that's kind of like getting past lens, because my lens, my understanding was faulty and getting past that. But what we just talked about with people who don't reorganize their lens or don't anything, they just go back to, to dogmatically adhering to their theory prior. I look at that because that is a possibility, and because that does happen, I look and I go, no, it's still through the lens, because the person has to refine or move their lens to grasp it, and then they can redo it. They have to remake their hypothesis or possible truth. So
I think many people do that, by the way, or
yeah,
or everybody does it.
I mean, I would say I can't be certain everybody does it.
But it's kind of embedded in our, in our perception, like our brain, our mind, like property dualism. I'm not sure that I understand exactly.
Property dualism is just based off of a logical expression of Euclid or Leibniz's theory of identity, which is to say, if I say mind and brain are the same thing, right? That'd be kind of the materialist take. These are just the same thing. There's no difference. The problem is I have to say all qualities then, or predicates for mind, are the same with brain, okay? There's no case where I can differentiate between these. And it's actually Kripke did a really nice showing of the problem with this, and he used C-firing fibers in the brain, and he used the concept of pain. And he said, scientists will tell you that pain is due to C-firing fibers in our brain that causes pain.
Mhm.
Though, in all cases, when I experience pain in first-person perspective, I am not, attributing this to C fibers or anything. And if you see someone's C fibers, firing in their brain or anything like that, you could say that's indicative of pain, though that's not the
That's the
same as the
pain.
experience.
Yeah, I see.
And that's where the property dualism lies. And then we were talking about something else. Oh, we were talking about the lenses and actual truths.
Yeah, and how people actually use their minds and whether they use them or not.
They can use it, but we do know there exist people who choose. They don't learn. They choose not to learn. They stick to their delusions or areas like that, or they don't move forward. Or perhaps it's not something to be defamatory towards them. They have an actual, disease or something. They have short-term memory loss. Okay. This going back to the chain of memory. They touch a hot stove, ow, it hurts. You and me would usually associate hot stove with pain. So we wouldn't do it again. But that person then loses the memory. It's gone. So they have no chain to form the inductive reasoning. So they touch it again. Ow, it hurts. It's gone. Ow, it hurts. It's gone. They're stuck in a loop because they can't form a premise to a conclusion. They can't do that because inductive reasoning needs order, or any type of reasoning needs an order of premises linked by conjunctives or ands or commas. That's how it works. I might be getting too complex or off track here. I don't know.
How long those chains of reasoning can be? And
they can be as long as you want to be. Some of them are infinitely
and
long.
How long they can be that they not. I guess this scholastics who just could argue, write some thick volumes about some angels dancing on the and
well,
it's yeah.
Trust me, I think you've been in a chat where I've been called out. I get called out all the time when I use logic about the old pedanticism or angels dancing on a pinhead proverb. And the thing that I will always say is, if the logic or reasoning provides greater understanding or illumination of the subject matter, then it is not pedantic or faulty.
Yeah, but the point is,
it can be as long as it wants, as long as it's helping you understand. And this goes back to my refutation of Occam's razor, where it's like, no, it should be simple. I'm like, no, simplicity is not the answer. It's understanding the underlying concept. That's what we're aiming for.
In this case, aren't you afraid that you can't actually move any step forward? So if you encountered a problem, you started thinking about it and you can't find the solution, you just think about about just one step. So you can't make the next step, since you have to get the infinite regress in thinking.
There are unsolvable problems. They do exist. That's something, we talked about decidability in mathematics. Well, there's incompleteness in mathematics. There's this extends to logic, the foundations of logic. There are problems that I can present that don't have an answer to it. If I were to present you with the old assertion, this statement is false.
False, yeah.
You can't solve that problem.
I guess
the statement is true.
Bertrand Russell made something, like some contribution to this.
Yes, he was talking about the barber, or the set of it. The set of all things cannot be a set of itself, or the contradiction. This is Gödel. This is the idea. I'm making a statement talk about itself logically. If the statement is true, the statement is false. If the statement is false, the statement is true. Ergo, there's no answer for this. So
it drew mad some ancient philosophers. I remember reading some fancy stories, and Diogenes Laertius, like he mentioned some philosopher who just got crazy.
No. Those arguments go way back. I don't remember which philosopher it was, but they presented the argument, which is a version of Bertrand Russell's argument, which is what is it? A guy named something. We'll call him Bob. Bob is a thief. Bob is a liar. A liar from Athens. Bob says all people from Athens are liars. So if Bob is a liar, then what he says about Athens, that all people are liars, is not true.
Mhm.
But therefore, Bob can't be a liar because
Mhm.
he's from Athens.
yeah. This it's the same as Bertrand Russell. This
that's the exact same one.
Yeah, but barber, like
the barber that has a rule that a barber cuts all the hair of the people. There's one barber, he cuts all the hair of the people in this in the town. And the second rule is the barber, no, everyone in the town can't cut their own hair. They can only have it cut by the barber. And the barber, that's the rule. And then they say, who cuts the barber's hair? Because the barber can't cut his own hair. It can only be cut by the barber, but the barber's part of the town, so he can't cut his own hair. So
and then there's no way to.
The answer to that, by the way, is you make a super barber.
Super barber, like
you make a super barber who doesn't have to obey by those axioms. That's assuming
it's like Ubermensch, right?
Not that. No. That's a whole different thing.
All right.
You want to go straight to Nietzsche.
Yeah.
But
listen, I have some like more questions. Actually, we just touched a few questions. And
yep.
Yeah. Discovering or creating?
Yes.
Yeah. What is?
I would say.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, philosophy does both. That's what I would say. I would say what we discussed a while ago with ethics and morality and juxtaposing those two views or comparing them. I would say morality to me is kind of like creating or inventing, where we come up with the value. I just have to assume it or come up or anything. But there's also taking that value and trying to act out of it in the actual world or watching other people do it that are like me and learning from or discovering as I observe from them that maybe those values don't apply or are not actually, then I go back and redo it. It's kind of like what we were talking about with language too. So, I mean, I just look and be like, yeah, they both exist.
Do you think it's possible that like there will be at some moment nothing left to create? We'll create everything, and the creativity, which like will make no longer any sense.
It's possible.
We discover all particles or like create the theory of everything. Everything will be described.
The problem with discovering everything and knowing everything right now, and I want to make this explicitly, it's based on the current models we have to understand on it, which may not be the case in the future. But on the current model, I brought up Heisenberg's uncertainty principles. There are things that if we know more about, we know less about other things, which is, the classic is, I cannot know a particle's location and its velocity at the same time. Or the more I know about one, the less I know about the other is a problem. That may change. Science is always changing. But to me, it is possible that eventually there be nothing else to discover. It's possible there may not be anything else to invent. The only thing that I look at it and I just go like, yeah, that could all be possibly true, but it's not necessary. It hasn't happened yet. So your hypothesis is as good as anybody else,
Yeah, just a kind of mind game.
Yeah.
Do you have some thoughts on artificial intelligence? Like, what's going on in this field? How you perceive it? And
I think, okay. Do you know what strong and weak AI are? The designation?
Vaguely, very vaguely.
So weak AI is classically designated that a thing just has a singular function and it performs that function.
Yeah, and strong AI, it's like basically a multifunction.
You're learning. It's a learning, growing. We would say strong AI is basically comparable to like ours is the thing.
Does it have its own will?
Nah, but the thing is, I look at that
or
and
will,
I would go,
like, if from a deterministic point of view, that's will have it.
Here's my kicker. I would look and I go, as I observe any other rational being, I am dealing with weak AI. Now, this is going back to morality and ethics, what we talked about, because I am only inferring that rationality value from
their actions and
from their actions or functions, just like a machine. And I would say strong AI, the only way I can inference it with certainty is in my own head, where I can actually be certain that, this followed from this because I learned this. And even then, as we were talking with the series of memories, that still has problems. So I'd say, to me, AI is I. There is no difference. The only real difference isn't even a question of I, or even a question of consciousness. As many people, I define consciousness, to be clear, as observation of analogous rationality. So that I observe somebody and I go, the rationalism and in themselves is similar to mine. That singular quantity, that's a designation of a conscious being.
Is it uniquely human property or?
Yeah. And you said human. Here's the kicker. Personhood.
Okay, biological organisms. Okay.
Yeah. Personhood, to distinguish that from consciousness, is not that I'm thinking a dog can have consciousness from that definition, but personhood is what I look at a person and I see him analogous, not just in rational area, but analogous as well-rounded and thought of, like adult, a person. That's
so having some background, having some knowledge.
Like right.
Being able to understand you and
personhood's a very much more specific definition, a set of qualities, whereas consciousness can be a lot more things. It's a more advanced version. But as I'm looking at that and I go, as I observe another person, they are weak AI. As I observe another, or conscious being, they are weak AI. The only thing that I'm actually denying when I look at that arm, doing the function or anything, it isn't consciousness that I'm denying. It's mainly personhood. It's the fact that I look at them and I go, it doesn't have flesh, doesn't have all these biological features that are similar to me, ergo it's not a person. The thing is, I know from, like a robot phone call or something like that, if circumstances were different, an AI can totally trick me into thinking it's an I, just to the similar area that an I, like a person like you, if I didn't have like direct observation, maybe I do, could trick me into thinking that it's an AI. It could make it think, because maybe you start talking like really weird and robotic, and it sounds like you wrote out all your answers or prior and they're just kind of really general. I'm like, oh, I might be talking to a machine, or I may think from the machine that I'm talking to a person. And as both of those can be possibilities, consciousness to me is merely outside of your own thought, which I don't even think that's consciousness, that's just being, I would say is an illusion. It's just a contingent observation. So
illusion in terms of like everything has consciousness in this sense, or nothing, we just evolve to like perform certain patterns in our language and our emotions. It's just evolution of our biology, and thoughts are evolution of our biology too.
It's not even as particular to that. It's just that I observe something, it's sufficiently similar to my rationality or qualities I associate with rationality, ergo I dictate consciousness. That's all it is. It's not about any evolution, it's not about anything like that. It's just a simple observation, necessary analogy, there's consciousness. That's all I would go to it. And as to AI, by those areas, forget AI, almost anything could contingently be mistaken or thought of or designated as consciousness. I could be walking down the street at night and a light post may be, standing there. My glasses might be off, and I may think that's an irrational being. And granted, eventually I'll probably walk up and realize it's a light post. It's not that. But that instance, when I'm standing far away, I'm totally convinced I'm looking at another person, as it's observed. And this isn't just for consciousness, this is for all observations or perceptions. They're contingent. They can be wrong, is the big thing about them. It's not just deductive in your area of following through reason. So I don't know. I don't think consciousness, I think it's a fascinating area to study, but I don't think it's that hard of a problem. I don't get why everybody's flipping out about it.
So, but now there are lots of talks on the internet, like people say,
I know.
They try to solve this hard problem by.
It's not that hard. It's simple.
And by they compete. It seems that computer science compete with neurophysiology, and they try to neurophysiology. Yeah.
Here. I'll undo the material argument of consciousness right now with rigor. Okay.
Great.
Here's the thing. A materialist area of consciousness would say that I can copy your consciousness and put it in another machine, and that will be you just based off the sum of the memories, experiences, and everything in that. Okay. But then I pose a rebuttal to you, and I go, okay, that's interesting. But let's say that this machine copies your consciousness, but it doesn't kill you. You're still alive. You're still there with all your memories and everything, and it copies it into the machine. I take the headpiece and I go, which one's you? Both of you are going to answer.
Yeah, it's basically like to divide your brain, to separate two parts and say, and put them in.
It's a direct copy. You're still here. This one's still here.
Who are you? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to ask which one's Vladimir. They're both going to answer yes.
Yeah.
It's me. Yeah. And the thing is, I look at it and go, which one? Like, both is certain that it is it. I mean, clearly we're going to probably look at the computer and we're going to say, oh, that's not the real Vladimir. But that's where my other argument comes in. As like, you're talking about personhood. You're talking about biological components that make up a person rather than consciousness, because this thing's looking back to you, acting, doing everything the same thing of qualities that Vladimir is over there.
Yeah, but basically it just splits in two parts. It's like, when you reproduce, you also kind of lose a part of yourself. It grows and it becomes like the same thing.
It's similar in some aspects. People come up and they'll be like, you have your father's eyes, your mother's nose, these things that are similarities. But the big thing is, the one area that I can argue for that is that the fact that this is going back to a name in particularity, that we will say they have the similarities to this person, but that, the child isn't the other two people. The child is that child.
Yeah.
Let's call him Adam right there.
Adam.
Right.
All right.
The child isn't the offspring of Cleopatra and Bob. Isn't a copy of it. It's similar in some aspects, and we can designate it particularly within a consistent model of this family's
but it's just our way of describing it, right? But in reality, it's just a part of me and part of, like, not me, but a part of one person, a part of another person. They join together, and then there's another person, and how its consciousness emerges and what's going on there.
But that's the thing, you're going to look and go like, it's a part of me, he's a part of me and does everything. And then I'm going to take Adam in the other room and I'm going to hit his hand with a hammer. And then I'm going to look over and say, how you feel now? Or something like this. And then I'm going to pop my head back over. That's another thing to.
You mentioned earlier objective world. So you say you do not deny that it exists. I'd like to ask you, like, do you think that this objective world, it's the same world for everybody, or everyone, like every person, has its unique world? And if it's for everyone, like, where is it? And like for me, let me give you my kind of how I see it. So for me, like, every person is infinite and the world is infinite. So, and when you, like, we may have similar parts of the world, we may both observe them. It may be not just like parts which we may sense, but it also things which we may think about, like some books that we can read and discuss some parts of the universe, some whatever, forests, lakes, lands, whatever. But it's still like we will never be able to say that there's one person who knows the entire universe, who saw everything, who been everywhere, who just kind of lives in this objective world. And the point is, like, when I think this in this way, for me, it's very hard to define like the objective world in terms of separated from myself. So for me, everything I know, it's my objective world. But your world shouldn't necessarily be the same world. We share certain parts of the world, of like, this world. But since it's infinite, for me, I can't really come up with anything like this is an objective world and we all live in the same world. Even though we live in the same world, but none of us, we don't have rights to call it like independent objective world, in my opinion. That's
all right. Like my take on that would I be like, okay, I have to be very careful here. I think there is an objective world, galaxy, universe, reality, or something that we share. All right. And I think because not only because error on my part, but because of generalization in our speech and in certain actions, we have similarities that we can, realize against us. We kind of infer through these two actions, which, by the way, the error is accuracy, objective accuracy, and the generalization or the similarities is objective precision. Through these two instruments, a grouping together of data points, we infer that we have a shared objective world. The problem with that is I look at that and I go, I can infer that or imply it. Imply would be more correct. But the only way that I can grasp that world is through, this goes back to our translations, my language or my thought is the only area. And I go, because someone will probably go up to you and they'll be like, oh, a hyper materialist and scientist person will come up to you and they'll go, oh, we get beyond our thought, we get beyond our language, and we grasp the actual things. And the correct answer to that is like, oh, really? Show me how you do that, or tell me how you do that. And they have to start translating and doing it to themselves. But I do think there is I'm not a solipsist. I don't think there's just my mind. I would be more so a person of many minds, the idea that I'm around a bunch of other ends in themselves off the second formulation. And I think together we approximate an objective world through our individual experimentation, mass experimentation, all our errors together, and grouping of data points. The problem is we can never be certain of the objective world, given that it's contingent upon these two areas and not accuracy and precision, and not assumption like we would have with mathematics, deductive reasoning, and logic.
But it seems to me it's kind of belief then that there's an objective world.
Yes, that's exactly. I had a conversation, I think, on a chat a while ago where we were discussing epistemology as justified true belief. And a lot of people said, oh, the most important thing about this area is justification, or the most important thing is truth. And that designation, justification, is stand-in for usually evidence, or how you, how you prove that this thing is real. Truth is its referential property, that it's referencing something in the world. And I looked and I said, actually, I disagree. I think belief is the most important part of that Venn diagram. Looking and said belief. I'm like, belief in that area, by the way, means that you believe it's true. That's what it stands in for. Is
it your intentionality, like belief? Where does belief come from?
Yeah, well,
like just the way how you want.
I think it's true. That I go, yeah, that's sufficient. This is the kicker. We were talking about a person touching the stove and never coming to the conclusion, or people doing actions and never following through with the logic or learning anything. And belief for me in this area is, I look at it and I look, have you ever heard the adage, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink? That old adage. And I look at people it's very similar. I look at people and I go, I can show you all the evidence in the world and structure my assertions so they are referential. But if you do not want to believe what I am saying, if you do not want to grasp it, they don't have to. They can completely still say, yeah, I don't want to. They can have bad faith.
Yeah, they may build their own like, conclusions.
It happens all the time.
Their own systems. But that's actually what's going on. For like, they all argue whose systems is better, whose system is wrong, whose system is right. And,
I mean, and to clarify, a lot of times there are people that have substantially what I would say better systems than other ones off the basis of justification. They have more evidence, they have more rigor, they have more, area to say we're justified in believing this than other people who have very little or not very substantial. But whenever I use the area better than, more than, less than, or anything, I need to have circumstances that have transitivity. That's a fancy way to say that greater than, less than works in this given instance. It doesn't always work. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question. I don't remember the question. Yeah, I do believe there's an objective world, but we see it collectively through a lens. That's what I say. And I also have my own lens, which may be a consequence of the collective lens, or it may not be. And the way I differentiate between it is a recursive process of breaking it down and understanding it for myself and making it my own lens, my own will. So that's kind of the idea.
Does this objective world have a purpose? Like, okay, not just have of course there are lots of purposes, but does it have like the ultimate purpose? Like, what's the point of being? Let's say, like what's
I can give it a purpose. This is very existentialism. I can give it a purpose or say there's a reason. The only problem is, as I can do this, and as I recognize all of you as analogous beings, this going back to, consciousness, I then can conclude that all of you can do the same thing, can come and give it a purpose just as well as I can. And the thing is, there exist people whose purpose is the negation, not opposite or alternative, negation of my purpose. Ergo, our purposes could not exist within the same objective system if all the purposes were to be a sum. And therefore, I come to the conclusion that the purposes that we give are only sound in our minds. They can't be objective. The minute we give an objective purpose and we say this purpose has more importance than this purpose, we open ourselves to the possibility of contradiction. People exist. I may say the purpose of of our being is to eat pumpkin pie, and then someone over here is to not eat pumpkin pie. Well, we can't exist in the same objective, the same reality or consistent expression, because we negate one another. We wouldn't be consistent. It cannot both be pumpkin pie and not pumpkin pie at the same time. That'd be an actual dichotomy. So I guess I would state, no, I don't think there's an objective purpose. So I think teleology is
okay. But let's discuss some. Maybe there are some hierarchy of purposes. What is on the top of in your subjective,
in my area? The highest thing that I put at the greatest importance, this is all moral, the thing I put at the highest importance would be the development of cognitive faculties in humans, or not even humans, just in rational beings. I put that at probably the highest.
For everybody or for yourself? I mean, development, like you may just get smarter and smarter and study, or you want to, like, everybody, like the entire, like.
Here's the problem. If I say that isn't the imperative of all beings, that they develop their cognitive faculties.
Yeah, there will be somebody who says no. It's like
yeah. And that's the same problem with Kant's universal, where he says you have to figure out how everyone. And I'm going like, there's someone who says not, and now we can't exist. do I kill them? Is that what I do just so I can keep going? But I would say the most important thing to me is the development of our cognitive faculties and rationality in means that can be expressed. And this kind of immediately alludes towards logic. Logic's the big, huge thing that comes into frame for me.
What is the best way for you to study logic? Just read arguments, or maybe do some exercises?
Exercises.
Analytical reasoning. No,
you find yourself a good exercise book. I could reference. I have more than a few. And really, it's very similar to when you're first learning like mathematics. You have to really sit down. You have to go. There's going to be problems, and you're going to sit there and you're going to just work out the problems over and over again. And it feels repetitive, just like when you started mathematics. But the thing is, you start to recognize patterns and certain tendencies, and you start to apply it to the real world.
It's like grammar, basically, like studying grammar. Yeah,
very much so.
That's what I'm doing now.
I would say, yeah, grammar and logic go hand in hand. They're not separate. Logicians, well, some logicians like to act like it's a completely formal system that lives independently of grammar or anything like that. But then I look at them and go, well, as we express it, it certainly isn't, because a good example of this would be, in logical sense, me saying that there is not cat, and me saying it is not the case that not cat are the same thing. They're both an inference of double negation. But when I say this to a person in a way, one is me just being almost childish. You know, when you were a child and you used to say double negatives, not spaghetti.
But by the way, in Russian,
the other one is a refutation of a fact, of a circumstance. It's semantically different. That I'm saying it is not the case that that the sun is not at the edge of the universe. I'm refuting a fact there. I'm not just doing something childish, you know. So
in Russian, there's everywhere the double negation. It's not a problem. So in English, it's kind of,
it's weird. It's a problem. It sounds childish and weird.
Yeah, but in Russian it doesn't. Like in Russian, it's possible to use double negation, and that's okay. It works pretty well.
But that's a case where the language, the learned thing, experience that we like to act like is different, definitely
like you use it intuitively. You don't, when you think about it, of course you see that there's problem. It actually doesn't make sense. But when you use it intuitively, it seems you refer to something and people understand you, and that's okay. And there's so many idioms and metaphors where you use double negation, and people just that's like that makes sense. Well, yeah, all right. I guess we'll take the last question. And
okay.
What makes us think about philosophical questions? Like what drives us to become more intelligent and basically develop what you said, like intellectual capacities? And
I think I'm going to quote someone here. I don't want to do it too long, but I think Carl Sagan put it best, where he put it up as the pursuit of knowledge, or even expanding our minds, is a combination of skepticism and wonder interacting with ourselves. The fact that it's a combination of imagining things that we want to be, and developing these crazy things. This definitely applies to possible worlds that we were talking about in philosophy, hypothesis and all that, and then having that hard skepticism on the other area and challenging those things on the other area, and those constantly have an interaction. Mainly for me, my motivation in this is that there's a little bit of discontent with what I know right now, or something like this. It's
so you're not satisfied with,
not completely satisfied. No. I always kind of look at it and I go, it's more of the skepticism going, I bet I can do better. I bet I can, challenge that and do a little bit better.
Is it ambition, or
Yeah, you can understand it as that.
Is it
But
selfishness? Like you want to be smarter and know
it could be that
more and more
too.
and more. Mm-hmm.
It could be ambition, selfishness. It could be a selflessness, because
Mm-hmm.
maybe I'm trying to learn something because I want to share it with somebody who's struggling with
Mm-hmm.
it or help them with something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it could be understood as many things. Like I said, uh, as long
Yeah, there might be degrees of understanding. So at some moment, like when you're 20, you believe that you're doing this
oh
because of
yeah,
X, and when you're 30, you think, oh, now I know because of what I'm doing. And then next 10 years, you have a new understanding, and oh, that's
there,
pretty interesting.
like we were talking about, when you talk with people, there are plenty of concepts. Like I feel pretty secure with my understanding of axiology and ethics and the system I have right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I always realize there's a possibility that I have a conversation with somebody, because it's happened before, where I start having, and they pull the rug out from underneath my feet, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm sitting there like, it can always be refuted, knocked down.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to say that this is eternal.
Yeah, but at the
Um,
same time, it makes you like study more later. So you go,
yeah,
wow,
yeah,
I want to know
I could
how
do.
this how it's like
Fick could put it best.
touching the stove, right? And oh, what's happened, right?
Yeah, Fick could put it best when he said to me, when he said the vocation of the scholar is infinite. It's
Mm-hmm.
the idea that I can always be wrong. There can
Mm-hmm.
always be more. There can always be something that I can pursue further. And some people really don't like it, but I love the idea of just having the world yanked out from the common sense, yanked out from
Mm-hmm.
underneath me,
Mm-hmm.
and having to start again,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like a childlike delight.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like I get giddy.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I said it was the last question, but while we were discussing this one, he came up with another one. So, wisdom. Like, what
wisdom.
is wisdom for you? Yeah, because one of the reasons why I started doing this podcast was to find the wisest being on earth. So, and I like to ask this question about wisdom to see how people like think about wisdom, what they think it is, and give different
Uh,
interpretations, like it's kind of personal view.
wisdom to me is realizing how, this is kind of Socratic, realizing how little I know is what it
Mm-hmm.
is.
Mm-hmm.
That
So
rug being yanked out from underneath me, those
yeah,
moments where I feel like I get to start again. I get to start applying it
yeah,
again.
no
Uh,
knowledge of your own ignorance, right?
yeah, that's what
Mm-hmm.
it is. The
But
moment where
you see,
you stop talking and you start listening and thinking, that's
yeah.
when it starts to manifest
But
itself.
how to deal with this problem if you start earlier and you like learn more and more and more, and you see that people usually like mostly people do not like to learn a lot. They stop.
Well, they see it as
Yeah,
a race. They want
and
to complete it and be done.
yeah, and
And the thing,
you develop this sense of confidence. So the more you learn, like let's suppose you learn for 10 years, not at the university, but as you are doing, like reading books, analyzing them, doing
yeah,
exercise, and you like go on and you see like last year, you compare yourself with what you knew last year, and you see like there's certainly like there's an improvement, and now you understand much better. And then next year there's another improvement, and then after 10 years you see the evolution of
yeah,
your psychological growth. But then you interact with people who don't do any work of that sort, and you see that they kind of stay where you was like 10 years ago or even like 15 years ago. And then you think, oh, now like since I have been doing so much work for these like 10-15 years, now it seems that I'm like so confident, I know everything. And it's the further you go, the harder it is to like keep this like no knowledge of your own ignorance. You know that you don't know not everything, but you
yeah,
kind of you like it makes you feel as if you know so much,
confident.
much more than other people.
But to that confidence, I will just reply, when you feel like you know everything, remember the problem I brought up with the umbrella and
Mhm,
the infinite
mhm,
inductive
mhm,
proof.
mhm,
You
mhm.
feel more confident, you feel you know everything. But as long as there's any infinite amount of days, which there might be, I
Yeah,
don't
there
know.
may be
I think,
infinitely smarter, infinitely wiser beings and people. Yeah, you
I
understand that?
mean, I feel the people who get to feel this more than anything, or really get their common sense or their
Yeah,
certainty of themselves.
you know,
Mathematicians are big ones. skeptic philosophers are big ones where they just
this is
walk
me.
in and go,
You know, I
rip the
ran
carpet out from underneath you.
I ran from Russian language. Like I stopped thinking in Russian language because I was stuck with this idea that I'm the smartest person. Literally, I was thinking, damn it, I've read hundreds of philosophical books. I just studied all of them. I was writing every day for like 8 years in Russian. Every day, one page, analyzing my personal experience, analyzing books, trying to put my thoughts clearly. And at some moment, there was just nobody to talk with. And I said, okay, let's start new language and see how I'm going to do there. And I started like studying English, and I turned like, I became a child, basically. So like you start from the beginning. A month ago, I was talking about Hegel, Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, Kant, Hume, all these philosophers. And now I'm talking about how to, get dressed, or how to eat, or how to drink, or how to take shower. And, and I make countless mistakes. And I do, wow, it feels so stupid. I'm so like, I know nothing, but it's also a good feeling because it counterimposes the feeling which I had before.
When you look back at your life and you constantly look at yourself, like a year ago, and you go, man, I was stupid then, or man, I was stupid then. That's kind of, I talked about transitivity and progress of the spirit, Geist, or whatever you want to take for the time. I'm like, you're applying a circumstance there, and you're having consistency, and you're applying the order. You're making a possible teleology with a directionality. Causal link between a bunch of variables consistent, and you are progressing in a way that you can understand rationally and represent. And what you're doing after that, where you look at that and you start to realize, if that's how it's been happening in that pattern for that long, chances are the way I think now, that I may think
exactly.
It's probably going to get derooted in the future. So you're progressing to an inductive hypothesis.
I have my first stuff which I was writing 13 years ago, and I read them, and they're just impossible to read. And then like slow progress, and the same with like not just Russian language but English language too. When I started, I couldn't even put like few sentences together in writing, and it was hard, and it took me like an hour to write 5 sentences. Now it just automatically, I sit and write an entire page in 20 minutes, and I see that the quality gets better and better. And probably in next 5 years, but there's still this thought that like you can't reach the perfection, and you have to work forever to get better and better, and maybe like at some moment they maybe just change.
Going back to the talk of epistemology and belief, to me, when you feel you've had enough, you feel like you have enough. That's the point. It sounds arbitrary to somebody. People like to think that there's perfection, or that the objective idealism that they'll eventually grasp. But I go and I look at it and I go, nope, it's whenever you think you've had enough and you've stopped. Maybe you won't think that, and you'll just keep going. It's entirely possible.
Or you choose just a different area, like you have enough of mathematics or in philosophy or in any science, and then you just let's just try a new science, and you start from zero, and then you go slowly, and you see that you're and it helps you to understand that you didn't have enough in the first, like, since as soon as you get progress in another field, you see how can you apply some concepts and some ideas from this field to improve your understanding in the field which you thought you were master before.
Whenever it feels like every single time you acquire one new answer, 2 new questions pop up every
exactly. Just recently, a few days ago, I heard kind of funny thing about a philosopher, somebody who has a question to every answer. Yes, not an answer to every question, but
actually that's something rooted in the foundations of logic and mathematics, which is I can always have a derivation and come to it. The only thing is, that's nice, but someone can always take that derivation and turn it into a new premise.
Exactly.
And then bam, or a couple new premises, or 3. Or when I add a variable to any possible system, how many new theorems all of a sudden start popping up just from adding one, just off the rules that already existed. It's very, some people it's disheartening because there are people I talk to who like the idea of progressing towards thing and thinking they're completing it. But to me, I like the idea that I could do this forever if I wanted to. I just wanted to sit back and do it. I like that. It's kind of like just going to the gym for the heck of it rather than, wanting to be the strongest person eventually. I just like doing it.
Focus on the process. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. So thank you so much. It was very nice dance. I guess we may do more in the future, more conversations.
Okay.
So
thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'll stop